Welcome back to Shadows of the Farm. In today's episode, we're stepping beyond the headlines and courtrooms. We're diving deep into the aftermath, the long, reverberating shockwaves that followed the arrest of Canada's most notorious serial killer, Robert William Pickton. This isn't just about what he did. It's about what happened after, and what still hasn't been made right. When Robert Pickton was arrested in 2002, the world discovered horrors almost too brutal to comprehend. On a squalid pig farm in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, investigators unearthed remains and evidence that connected Pickton to the murders of dozens of women, many of whom had vanished from Vancouver's downtown east side. The story stunned a nation, not only because of its depravity, but because it had gone unchecked for years. The media pounced. Overnight, the pig farm became a household name, and Pickton's face, scruffy, hollow-eyed, and unrepentant, was everywhere. But many Canadians asked a haunting question. Why did it take so long? Why were these women not taken seriously? Their disappearances had been reported. Families had begged for help. Yet little was done, until it was far too late. The early media coverage of the missing women was limited and often dismissive. Descriptors like sex workers, drug addicts, and transients were thrown around carelessly. But as the horror on the Pickton farm unraveled, that narrative changed. Public perception shifted. The media could no longer ignore the stories behind these women, mothers, sisters, daughters, each with lives and people who loved them. In the years that followed, Robert Pickton's crimes would inspire a wave of documentaries, books, and investigative reports. Stevie Cameron's On the Farm became the definitive work on the case, an empathetic yet unflinching look at how society failed some of its most vulnerable citizens. British documentaries like The Pig Farm went global, and CBC's The Fifth Estate devoted multiple episodes to unraveling the systemic failures behind the murders. But with notoriety came controversy. In 2016, a self-published book appeared online, Pickton, in his own words. Credited to Pickton himself, it was a rambling justification of his innocence and a scathing attack on the justice system. Public outrage was swift. The book was pulled within days, and new laws were proposed to prevent convicted criminals from profiting off their crimes. The societal effects of the Pickton case cannot be overstated. It exposed deep cracks in the justice system, and an even deeper apathy toward marginalized women, particularly Indigenous women. Public trust in the Vancouver Police Department and the RCMP eroded. Apologies were issued. Inquiries were launched. But for many families, these gestures were too little, too late. One mother at the inquiry said, "She wasn't just a sex worker. She was my daughter. She mattered. And nobody cared until it was too late." That pain echoed across the nation. These weren't just missing women. They were stolen futures. And the silence around their loss was deafening. Many survivors and victims' relatives struggled with trauma that continues to this day. PTSD, depression, and substance relapse are common. And the downtown east side, once dismissed as Canada's Skid Row, has become a symbol of both suffering and resistance. Memorials now line the streets. Names are spoken every year at the Women's Memorial March. With such a dark legacy, it's no surprise that urban legends took root. Some claimed Pickton fed human remains to his pigs, something investigators never confirmed, though they didn't rule it out. Others said he sold contaminated meat, or that he was part of a snuff film ring. These rumors, while sensational, point to something deeper. A society grappling with evil it doesn't fully understand. The political fallout was swift and scathing. In 2012, the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry, led by Commissioner Wally Oppel, released a damning report. It detailed widespread failures in how police handled the disappearances. Officers ignored tips. Files went missing. Stereotypes shaped decisions. And women kept dying. Oppel's report made 63 recommendations, including calls for a regional police force and major reforms in missing persons investigations. But many of those recommendations remain unimplemented. Bureaucracy, funding, and politics have slowed the wheels of justice. Once again, the burden falls on the families, still fighting for change, decades later. Yet there has been some progress. In 2016, Canada launched the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Its final report, released in 2019, did not mince words. It called the violence a Canadian genocide. A term that shocked the nation but reflected generations of neglect and violence. Culturally, the Pickton case transformed how Canada sees violence against women. Songs, poetry, and plays have emerged, each one an effort to reclaim stories erased by time and indifference. Artists use their work to remember not how these women died, but how they lived. Their joy. Their pain. Their humanity. Still, the trauma lingers. Some families never recovered. Others have become activists. Names like Mona Wilson, Georgina Papin, and Brenda Wolfe are etched into national memory. Not just as victims, but as women who sparked a reckoning. Pickton's pig farm was eventually razed, but the land remains poisoned in the public imagination. Forensic crews once sifted through 383,000 cubic meters of soil, looking for bone fragments, DNA, closure. They didn't find everything. Many families never got remains. Just a name on a file. And a date that never made sense. In 2010, the Profits of Criminal Notoriety Act passed in British Columbia. It bars convicted killers from profiting off books, movies, or memorabilia. The law was direct fallout from Pickton's attempts to sell his story. But even laws can't erase pain. Nor can they restore the dignity that was stripped from these women by both a killer and a system. As we close this chapter, we urge you to remember the lives behind the headlines. Remember that justice isn't only about conviction, it's about prevention, about compassion, about reform. The Robert Pickton case wasn't just a tragedy. It was a test. And for many, Canada failed.